being able to speak with the swans represents her relationship with her aunt.
Yes.
So that's what this story is about. It's not a romance story. There's a romance in it.
Yeah.
And it's tender, and it's fun, it's goofy, and there's a fun little twist that I saw coming from a million miles away.
Yes.
Which I'm proud of for me.
You did it!
I know. I'm not usually good at noticing those things. I'm usually just along for the ride.
I did not see it coming the first time I read it. But I was
but you were
also
also a child.
11 the first time I read it.
Garrett's the prince!
Yeah.
What's his name?
Garrick.
Garrick. Okay. I couldn't remember. She has like subtle twists on real names.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know it's something like Garrett.
Anna instead of Emma. Garrett instead of Garrick
instead of
Garrett.
Annie.
Yeah.
Or Celia instead of Snake, because she's a snake.
Yes.
We'll get into that.
Yes.
Hello, and welcome to the Your Favorite Book podcast. I'm Tanner.
I'm Malorie.
And we like reading books.
And we're siblings.
We got that backwards.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. It has been a hot minute since we've done this. It's almost been 3 days.
Yeah, 3 whole days.
Yeah. On today's episode, we read Goose Girl by Shannon Hale, which was one of Mallory's favorite books.
Yes.
She recommended I read.
Yes, I love this whole series. It's called The Books of Bayern, is the whole series, because that's the place that it takes place in.
The word you're looking for is setting.
Setting. The setting is Bayern. And I might be pronouncing that wrong. I don't think I am, but, you know, the possibility's there.
No, that's how I would say it.
Yeah, okay, good. I have loved this book series and this author for a long time.
Generations.
Yes. Well, our parents both love Shannon Hale.
Yeah.
And they recommended this book series to me along with her Princess Academy series. And she also has... She's got a lot of books. She wrote the Ever After High novels, and she's done a couple
comics,
graphic novels with her husband.
Yeah.
And she has some children's books out there, like actual children's book, paper book.
She's got a broad range.
Yeah, she really does.
To Neil Gaiman.
Yeah.
It's rare to find a versatile author like that.
Yeah, and she's fantastic. I think I have a hard time deciding what my favorite series of her is, but my top ones are Books of Bayern, The Princess Academy, and then she has a standalone called Book of 1,000 Days. And she kind of specializes in retellings. A lot of her books are retellings. She has a Rapunzel retelling. Book of 1,000 Days is a Book of 1,000 Days retelling. Goose Girl is a Goose Girl retelling. She enjoys those kinds of things, and I think she really puts a fantastic spin on all of them.
Yeah. I'm not familiar enough with those old fairy tales to know what those spins are. So when I read this, I didn't know that it was a Grimm... What's it called?
Brothers Grimm.
Brothers Grimm retelling. That's how little I know about those fairy tales.
Yeah.
So when I read this, it was totally fresh to me.
Yeah, I felt the same way when I was younger and read it. I was like, whoa, what a crazy thing. But that's
the right way to do a retelling.
Yeah, it is. And it's kind of a lesser known Brothers Grimm. You usually think of Red Riding Hood or, stuff like that. And I love it. It's so interesting and fantastic and
very magical. Yeah, magical's the right word.
Yeah.
This, when I finished reading this book, I was like, this is what every Sarah J. Maas book wishes it were.
Yes. Yes.
And I know that this podcast has just become me, talking bad about Sarah J. Maas. It changed from
Brandon Sanderson acolyte to Sarah J. Maas
hater. And now I talk way more about Sarah J. Maas than I do about Brandon Sanderson. Why does my brain do that?
Turned into.
I know. Everyone's drawn towards negativity. Even me, I'm not immune. But this is a similar format to the romantasy trope, where it's about a princess or a girl who marries a prince or falls in love with a very rich, handsome young man. And when I first started reading this book, I was a little bit worried just because I have all this trauma of reading Sarah J. Maas books. I'm like, don't do this to me again. Don't take me down this path, Shannon Hale. I have faith in you, because her writing is brilliant.
Yes.
So the writing, and it's not really a prologue, I think it does begin with chapter 1, is beautiful.
Yeah.
But when the story begins, really, is when Anna Dory, who's the main character, her mother tells her, you're not going to become the crown prince. You're not going to be the crown princess anymore. You're not destined to become queen of Kildenry. I'm going to marry you off to Bayern, which is a neighboring country, in order to achieve peace negotiations.
Yeah.
Because Bayern is a warlike and dangerous people, and Kildenry is this poor, innocent mountain village.
Yeah.
So delicate, we don't have any men. We don't have an army.
Yeah.
That's when the story begins. And that's when I was like, oh no, it's going to be about this poor princess falling in love with the prince. She's going to be stuck in the castle reading all day. It's going to be so boring. Thankfully, I was wrong.
Yay! I was a little nervous giving this book to you because I love this series. It's my comfort series. I reread it and I listen to the audiobook very regularly.
Yeah.
And I love the whole series. I really love book 2. It was in my top 5 books that we did. So I was apprehensive.
I can understand
to
that.
share it with you, but it's great.
It is great.
It's great.
Yeah, I can tell that you're worried about me reading this because I can... this is a trope or a genre maybe that you really admire, and I wonder if it started with Goose Girl.
Yeah.
Where it's like a princess goes to find their destiny and falls in love with the prince.
Yes, in like a whole new place, and they're left with no one to know, and they have to meet all the new people and try to find where they belong. I love that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I can relate to that to a degree.
Yeah.
I don't really love I like books with romance in it, but if romance is like the primary element of the story, then it's kind of like a snooze fest for me.
Yes.
Unless it's really well told.
Yeah.
And I've yet to read a book where the romance is the primary storytelling element that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And this book feels more like there's a little bit less romance and more about Ani finding her family or her destiny.
Yeah.
This book gave me strong Assassin's Apprentice vibes, which is a big plus for me.
Yeah.
I loved that book. It was my favorite book of 2023. It was a very similar type of story.
Yeah.
Where it's like this noble person is trying to find their destiny. Goose Girl is kind of a combination between 2 different stories. It's a fairy tale retelling, apparently.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I'll take your word on it. But it's kind of like the Ugly Duckling meets the Prince and the Pauper.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
The Ugly Duckling comparison is quite apt because it's called the Goose Girl.
Yeah, there's geese in this. Don't know if you knew that.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, there's geese. The story begins with Ani. On page 1, she's born.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
Like, Assassin's Apprentice starts basically the exact same way. It's like, page 1, he was born.
Yeah.
And then it's like every day of his life until he becomes an assassin. Anadori, Isili, Kildenry, whatever.
Yeah, she's got a lot of names.
Yeah. That's like the first sentence in this book is that it throws like 5 fantasy names in a row at you. And it's like, okay, if you do not like this type of stuff, then you are out.
Yeah, which I guess is good. I mean, you would want to catch your specific readers on the first page, and I think she does a great job at that.
Me too. It establishes the right tone. It's a magical fairy tale.
Yeah.
An epic magical fairy tale. And she, for 3 days, never opens her eyes.
Yeah.
And then her aunt comes over, cradles her, and says she has a word on her lips.
Yeah.
But she just hasn't spoken it yet.
Yeah, she's looking for it. She's trying to taste the language that she has.
Yes.
Ooh, I love this book so much.
The way that she describes that is so delicate.
Yes.
And beautiful.
Yeah, you can tell she's very masterful with her craft and so specific with every single word for each sentence. Like, it's like a perfectly decorated and prepared pastry.
Yeah.
It has, you can see all the work that's gone behind it, and you can just fully appreciate it as it is.
Yes, but it's not like gauche or overdone.
Yeah.
It's like the perfect amount of decoration.
Yes.
I really, you come to appreciate how important a writer's skill is to establishing a sense of tone or mystery.
Yeah.
Like, there are very few authors who can do that well, in my opinion. Like, Terry Pratchett's one.
Yeah.
He sets a very goofy tone.
Yes.
Shannon Hale's another where she sets a very...
fantastical...
soft magic fairy tale tone.
Yeah.
Where the world feels much bigger and more mysterious than it is. And Tamsin is the other one.
Yeah.
Hers is more like dark and brooding and hilarious. And her world building feels like I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, but it's perfect.
I know, but I can't stop reading.
Yeah.
So a lot of positives that I have to say for this book. I really did enjoy it from start to finish. And I think a big part of that is because of the scope. Ani, she is basically raised by her aunt for like the first 7 years of her life.
Yeah.
And she has other siblings, but she doesn't really spend time with them.
Yeah.
She spends all of her time with her aunt.
And she's the crown princess from the beginning.
She's the eldest born.
Yeah. So her whole life she's separated from the rest of her family because she's training to be queen. And so there's a big space between her and her other siblings.
Yeah.
And she's also a weird girl.
Apparently
so
she's weird.
That helps
yes.
the gap there.
At the beginning, she does establish the magic system right away. At least a portion of it.
Yeah.
There are 3 different gifts that people can be born with. You're either born with the gift of people speaking, which is what her mother can do. Beast speaking, which is what she and her aunt can do, and element speaking.
Yeah, like nature speak.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's called nature speak. You can speak with earth, wind, and fire, basically the Aristotelian elements.
Yeah, but that one's like supposed to
super
be lost.
Rare.
No one really is alive to teach it anymore or to learn it, and so that one is much more rare.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people in the world who don't believe in any of that in the first place anyway.
Or it's seen as taboo.
Yeah, and like the only one that's really useful, I guess, is the people speaking for, you know, people in high political offices or just master manipulators, really. You know, like...
And that one is, that gift is something that regular people, at least this is the implicit implication. This is the implication, which is that people with the gift of people speaking aren't seen as evil witches.
Yeah.
They don't notice that it's being worked upon them unless you've experienced that before and you know what that magic is.
Yeah.
Like Ani, there are a couple characters in this book who use people speaking against her, and she can recognize when the magic is taking its effect.
Yeah, because she's grown up with her mother who has that, and one of her friends has that too in the story.
Her lady in waiting.
Yeah, her lady in waiting has that same ability, and part of why I love this magic system so much is because that is a real thing to me. Like, you can see people in the world who have an innate ability to talk to people and communicate with them on a different level than, like, I'm able to. So it's interesting to read stuff about that because you're like, oh, I know someone in my life who can do that so incredibly well. And then you're like, maybe I could speak with the wind too.
Yeah. Or maybe I can speak with animals. I was born to speak with animals.
Yeah.
And there are people like that too, like horse whisperers or dog trainers or whatever. Yeah. So I liked the magic system for that, where it felt more tangible and real, instead of like Brandon Sanderson, where it's like you can control gravity, which is like so unrelatable, but still really cool in its own right.
Yeah, yeah. I really love how subtle the magic system is in this book, and how it's very well integrated into the world building and into the characters themselves. And I like that. It kind of fits, it fits really well with the overall tone of the soft fantasy, fairy tale, gauzy, pinky, bloomy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, the cottage core fantasy.
Yes, exactly. It fits really well.
Yeah, it does. One of the problems that I have with soft magic systems is when they play a role in the plot and they don't have good rules or a good cost, and it feels like the character has a tactical nuke they can throw into the scene to like win the day.
Yes.
And that does not happen in this book, thankfully.
It doesn't.
Another problem that I have with certain magic systems or books with magic systems in them is when a character learns a magic ability at the very last second of the book and they don't explain it, they don't build up to it, and they overcome the final obstacle. Yeah. That's not very satisfying either. So I was also kind of concerned about that with this book. Yeah. When Ani eventually, spoiler alert for this whole book, she does learn another magic system, which is the ability to speak with the wind. But there is a cost to it, and it does build up to it. Yeah,
I love the slow training montage for that ability for her. And so Ani has the ability to communicate with a lot of birds. That's her best and most used gift, and that's part of why she becomes the Goose Girl, and she learns how to communicate with the geese, so she's like the best Goose Girl. That sounds so weird out of context, but it's great in the book, and it doesn't feel weird in the book. And Shannon Hale's magic systems feel so unique. Like, the way that she learns and begins to communicate with the wind is so different than the way that she speaks with her horse or with her... She has is it a kitten or a dog in the beginning? She tries to speak with...
Oh, she has a dog.
A dog in the beginning.
It's a puppy.
And even just between the geese and the swans that she takes care of, like, there's uniqueness for each of those systems, and I loved that.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill. It's not something where it's like you're born with this innate ability to communicate with animals, which is something that happens in Assassin's Apprentice, where you're born with the gift to telepathically communicate with any animal. In this book, it's more like you have to understand, you have to make the same sounds as the animal.
Yeah.
You have to move the way the animal moves, like use their body language. All that stuff's cool.
Yeah.
So there is a sense of progression for Ani having to learn how to communicate with different animals. She's just best with swans.
Yeah.
And with eventually geese.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the story, Ani, she is spending all of her time with her aunt, and her aunt tells her, don't speak to animals in front of anybody else.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a scary thing for people. Similar to Assassin's Apprentice. And there was something really cool about that when I realized, what a cool cost for a magic system.
Yeah.
Where we talked about how, like, in Hell Followed With Us, there's an emotional component, like, to using their magic. Benji, he can speak with graces, these monsters. But it's hard for him to do that because he hates having that ability.
Yeah, it's like emotionally traumatizing.
Yeah, so that's a cool cost. It's not like a resource.
Yeah.
Or
you have mana
else
that you spend.
Which is kind of typical.
Yeah.
But you can also have a societal cost to using a magic system.
It's so interesting. Like, I don't usually see that often. At least, I mean, there's plenty of books where that is the whole premise of the magic system.
I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah, it's cool to see. And you can also see how that would make sense. I love this book.
Yeah, it's neat. I do have a couple of complaints about that, but we'll bring them up later.
Okay.
I think it's done well in Goose Girl, where it's like, don't speak to birds in front of other people.
Yeah.
Or else what? We do see the cost to that,
yes,
though, in the beginning.
And we see it later on, too.
Yeah. In something like Assassin's Apprentice, I think it's done a little bit better.
Yeah, there's very blatant physical consequences when the main character communicates with the animals.
And someone else notices.
Yes.
Yeah. And we also see over time Fitz changing as he deepens his bond with an animal.
Yeah.
So there's a cost there, too, to using that magic ability. Anyway, the point... It's just a small gripe that I have. I have very, very few complaints about this book.
I think that's interesting. I disagree.
Well, I have my reasons for later on.
Okay, perfect. Then we'll get into it.
Yeah, but the point is, her ability to speak with animals is deeply personal to her, and her aunt teaching her how to speak to animals is also very important.
Yes,
because it sets up Ani's internal journey for the whole book. So eventually, Ani's aunt leaves. All of a sudden, out of the blue, she says, "I'm returning to the mountains. You're on your own, kid. See ya." Bye. Super sad.
Yeah.
The first few chapters of this book, you have so much empathy for Ani. And then Ani goes back basically to training to become the crown princess under her mother's guidance.
Yes.
And up until this moment, she has never had a very close relationship with the queen. And that bothers her.
Yeah.
She wants to impress her mother, to show that she's worthy of being the crown princess.
Yeah.
To show that, because she wants to know that she's worthy of her mother's love.
Yes.
Which she's never given her.
No.
She's always held her daughter at arm's length.
Yeah.
And as soon as her aunt leaves, it's even worse.
Yes.
Because her real mother, which is her aunt, is gone.
Yeah.
Eventually, Ani's aunt dies. And it's super sad.
It is. It's heartbreaking.
And Ani is so distraught, and she's, I'm assuming at this point in the story, 13.
Yeah.
And this stuff happens really early on in the book.
Yeah.
This is like the first two chapters.
Couple chapters read as a prologue.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with it.
Wish it was a prologue, but
yeah, I don't have a problem with it at all.
It still works.
Yeah, it does skip around a bit, where it's like Ani was born, and then she's 7 years old, and then she's 13. Yeah. Like, it's covering these really pivotal moments in her past. Yeah. Really quickly to establish her worldview and her character arc. And it's all great. No complaints. It does mean that it takes a little while for the story to feel like it's actually starting.
Yeah, it definitely does.
But I'm okay with the slow burn. Like I said, Assassin's Apprentice was like my favorite book of 2023.
Yeah.
That is like the slowest of burns ever. The definition of
slow burn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's establishing her character arc.
And I just love Shannon Hale's writing so much that I really enjoy the pace and I enjoy the tone.
Yeah.
I didn't have a problem with it either.
No. I can see how someone who doesn't like epic fantasy would be bored quickly.
For sure. Especially
it's about a princess.
Especially if you read like the current trend of this kind of book. Yeah. It's very different than how this one starts.
Sarah J. Maas does like to get into the story rather quickly. We're not going to get into Sarah J. Maas today, even though I am going to bring it up often in this podcast specifically. Ani, there's a party happening for something. There's some big gala happening. Yes. And she leaves and sleeps with the swans that night.
But she's so sad.
Yes. And she tells the swans, my heart is broken. I don't know where my hurt is. And the swans say, come sleep with us. I'm
even just thinking about it. I love this book.
Yeah. This is where you should really focus on your strengths as an author, where it's similar to Suzanne Collins in The Hunger Games, which I really loved The Hunger Games, truly. Yeah. And then the second and third book, I feel like her scope got out of hand.
Yes.
But in The Hunger Games, she can make you fall in love with Katniss and Prim's relationship in just a few sentences. Seriously.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And I really wish she had just zoned in on that aspect of her storytelling.
Shannon Hale obviously does, and that's part of what makes this so fantastic.
Yes. She doesn't worry about too many characters. The plot is super simple. The magic system is also very simple. Yeah. And she handles each of those elements of storytelling perfectly. Almost perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's like, it makes you go, okay, well, you don't need all this extravagant stuff to prove yourself as a writer.
In my opinion, less is more. Yeah. In almost everything you do in any creative endeavor. Like, since doing this podcast, I've realized the thing that bothers me the most about the stories that I don't like is that they try to be more than they are. Yeah. Where it's like, I wonder if Sarah J. Maas wants to write a book similar to Goose Girl, but it's more adult and it's bigger scale. Where it's like, it'd be so much better if you cut down on all of these elements, like in almost every category. Yeah, like I have... Sorry, go ahead.
No, well, we talk about frequently boiling down your stuff and making it more condensed and more precise and simpler. And that makes it stand out better versus having so much stuff that you can't focus or put the time in on all the big, huge stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's because authors are inspired by great works of art. Yeah. Like, for me, I love The Way of Kings. If I tried to start writing The Way of Kings, my version today, it would be horrible. So bad. Like, he takes every element of storytelling and takes it to the 10th degree. Yeah. In terms of scale. Yeah. But you have to master those small things first. Yeah. And you should really start by like, okay, just making you fall in love with one character. And Goose Girl does that. Yeah. In a few short chapters. It's like, oh my God, that's the perfect way to show us what Ani wants.
Yes. Yeah.
Where she leaves this group of people where they're having a party. It like speaks to me so much on a personal level. Where if you relate to that, it's like, oh my God, my heart breaks for this poor little girl who doesn't have a family. And that's what she wants. That's what the story's about. It's the ugly duckling story. So the swans, to her, being able to speak with the swans represents her relationship with her aunt. Yes. So that's what the story is about. It's not a romance story. There's a romance in it. Yeah. And it's tender and it's fun. Yeah. It's goofy. And there's a fun little twist that I saw coming from a million miles away. Yes, yes. Which I'm proud of for me.
You did it!
I know. I'm not usually good at noticing those things. I'm usually just along for the ride.
I did not see it coming the first time I read it. But I was also 11 the first time I read it.
Garrett's the prince!
Yeah.
What's his name?
Garrick.
Garrick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I couldn't remember. She has like subtle twists on real names.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know it's something like Garrett.
Anna instead of Emma.
Yeah.
Garrett instead of Garrett.
Annie.
Yeah.
Or Celia instead of Snake, because she's a snake.
Yes.
We'll get into that.
Yes.
But the scope of this book is just right.
Mm-hmm.
We know what her internal quest is.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to find her family.
Yeah.
And after she falls asleep with the swans, it kind of fast forwards like maybe another few years later, and she's 17.
Yeah.
When the book begins.
Mm-hmm.
So all that other stuff in the first 3 chapters it does read like a prologue.
Yeah.
And then the book begins when she's 17, and her mother basically tells her, "You're not worthy to be the crown princess anymore."
Well, she watches her father pass away first.
I forgot about that.
She's on a horse
Okay, I
ride
do
with her
have a
father.
thought about that.
She's on a horse ride with her father and loving it, and then her father's like,
He doesn't just have a heart attack. He tries to jump over a fence that's
oh,
too
that's
big,
right.
and then he
That's
dies.
right. Yeah.
So I think it would have been
silly.
better if he died from a heart attack or something. Because
Yeah.
this is just a
understand that.
gripe that I have with this moment, where it's like, okay, I do like that instead of just heaping on the empathy for Ani at the beginning of this book, she gives her things that she cares about and she loves, and then she slowly takes them away
Yeah.
as the book goes on.
Yeah.
Which is
that's a
also
good
very
point.
Assassin's Apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward a few years later, she and her best friend Celia, her princess, are waiting. They have a good relationship, as far as we can tell. She has a horse named Falada. This is also another cool thing about the magic system.
Yes.
She adds these little twists.
Yeah, like for domestic animals, in order to learn their language, you have to be there when they're born. And the first sound they make is their name. And if you can repeat their name back to them, it unlocks a pathway of communication between
Which
the
is
two
so
of them.
cool.
It's so interesting, and it makes sense. Like, geese are more, well, they are domesticated, but it's different than a dog or a cat or a horse, which...
Or we see them as a companion for a human.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
those ones are the kinds where you have to be there to experience their first word. I love that. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's those nice little details that really make you appreciate how much work they put into their magic systems.
Yeah.
And it makes the magic systems feel deeper than they actually are.
Yeah, and the other difference is with swans or geese or other animals, you kind of say what they say and move how they move, like you said, versus the domesticated animals. It's like a telepathic communication.
Yeah.
You know, you get to see Falada and Annie have conversations, which is fun.
And she loves Falada.
Yes.
Falada is like her closest family, except for maybe her father.
Yeah.
But her father has less power over her destiny than her mother. So her father really does fill the role of typical father role. But they have this nice banter. The banter's really good in this book, by the way. I love the dialogue.
Yeah.
Once again, less is more.
Yes.
Stop trying to impress me with this old English language.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe that bothers me a lot because that's what I try to do with my writing. Is I'm like, I'm going to show you how smart I am. So it's
funny.
cringy in that way because it's relatable. Like, why am I trying so hard?
Yeah.
And like immediately he rides off. He says, "Race me!" And then she's like, "Dad, don't jump over that fence. It's too big." And then he falls off his horse and he dies.
Yeah.
And the timing is comedic.
It is funny.
But I understand what she's trying to do.
Yeah.
It did make me laugh out loud. But it's not like, okay, at this point, something so ridiculous has happened. I haven't liked it up until this point. I was so invested in Ani. I liked the writing. I liked the world building that it didn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was just funny timing.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like maybe there could have been a bit more of an adventure, like they go on a hunt or something,
Yeah.
or they're chased by somebody and then he dies.
Just a single, I'm going to jump over the fence.
It's like, hello,
it's
Dad.
Too tall.
Our relationship's great and now you're dead.
Yeah.
Anyway, after that, there's a 6-week mourning period. And Ani suspects that her mother is going to take her inheritance, I guess, away from her.
Yeah.
And give it to her younger brother. And they don't really play a role in the story that much. It's just to show you that what Ani wants is to become the crown princess to earn her mother's approval and therefore have her love.
Yes.
But she's not good enough at speaking with other people or princessing. Yeah. And they show how comfortable she is with other animals and with one-on-one conversations, like with her
Yeah.
father and with Celia.
Yeah.
Really well by Ani speaking with Celia's mom.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's
And
like
she's like,
so stiff and uncomfortable.
uh-huh.
And she leaves abruptly. Like, she has terrible people skills.
Yes.
So she really very quickly shows you that these characters are where their strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah, she's really great at that.
Yeah. So then it makes sense in a way when her mother says, Ani, you're not fit for this role. I'm going to send you off to Bayern.
Yep, you're going to go be the princess bride across the country where our enemies are going to come take our forests if you don't go marry them. Bye, you leave in like 3 days. It's like fast.
Yeah, basically the next day. They also show that Ani is really non-assertive.
Yes.
Whatever the antonym for that word is.
Passive.
Passive, thank you.
Yeah.
Because she waits for the 6 weeks of mourning before she can ask her mother, hey, are you giving away my crown? Yeah. Because her mother lets it slip during her father's funeral that she's going to give it to
her younger brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she doesn't confront her about it at all.
Yeah,
which is
neither of
important
them
for her
say
character.
anything, too. Like, the first time Ani hears about that is in front of all of the people. And she's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And she either is respectful, she observes decorum too much, that she wouldn't confront her mother about it, or she's passive. And I think it might be both.
I think so, too.
But the fact that we can speculate on these things about Ani's intentions tells you that she's doing a good job of showing you who she is as a character.
Yeah. Yeah. She's complex.
Yes. And those things change over time. So that's another type of progress where it's like she has to juggle all these different things. Where she's going to learn a magic system. She's going to go on an adventure, find her family, and she's also going to change in terms of how passive she is.
Yes.
And how good she is at talking to other people and expressing herself.
Yeah, Shannon Hale sets that up from the beginning and delivers on all of them.
Yes.
Which is something that you hate when authors don't do.
Yes, and I don't know why it doesn't bother more people.
It does not bother me as much as it bothers you. So I'm glad that glad I finally gave you a book that meets all of the promises it gives in the first 5 chapters.
Okay, but that's important.
It is important.
You can read something like Goose Girl and something like Throne of Glass, and you might not be able to articulate why those things are happening, why one book is more satisfying than the other.
Yeah.
But you can feel it when you're reading it. Where it's like, oh, I didn't realize. Your brain does capture that moment when she's like, she never went to talk to her mom for those 6-week mourning period.
Yeah.
And at the end of the book, she's more assertive. It's like, wow, she really grew.
Growth.
Yeah, that's what you want. You want to see a character change over time, build towards something.
And she does a good job at showing not telling that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, she was so nervous, she was so afraid.
You're passive all the time. And then she never
like,
shows us why she's passive.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry to talk over you.
No, that was it.
Yeah. So that starts off the adventure of this book.
Yeah.
Where she's sent off, and that's where my worries began.
Yes.
Where it's like, it's another Sarah J. Maas book.
Yeah, she's got this giant caravan of all her wedding gifts, basically. A whole bunch of soldiers. Her lady-in-waiting is with her, and they're going to go trek through the mountains for like 3 months, I think is how long it is.
Something like that.
It's a long trek.
Yeah.
And it's not the kind of trek where you can be like, oh, we forgot something. It's only been a week. Let's go double back and get it. It's like,
we're stuck here.
Super huge, and the forest mountain range around them is unfamiliar to everybody, especially Ani, who's, never stepped outside the palace.
And it's uninhabited,
It's uninhabited, and there's supposed to be evil people there. Like, she does a great job at setting the tone for this perilous journey.
There's wolves and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And at this point in the book, Ani, because of her traumatic upbringing, has kind of forgotten that she can speak to other animals. Or she knows that she can, but she won't acknowledge it. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think that's kind of her trying to become the crown princess and become the thing that her mom wants her to be. And so she's like, okay.
And so she's rejected that part of who she is.
Yeah.
Which is great. That's also a part of her character arc that gets paid off in the end. And while they're traveling through the forest, you mentioned that she's traveling with all of these gowns, and there's one scene where she has someone heat up a bath for her in the middle of the forest, and everyone else bathes in the cold stream, and she doesn't think about it. She's just used to being taken care of.
Yeah.
And all that stuff's really important because Celia, her princess...
Her lady-in-waiting.
she has been harboring this intense jealousy towards her for her entire life.
Which she's hidden the whole time.
Yeah.
Ani genuinely thinks they're best friends and doesn't see anything wrong with their relationship, which is a fantastic character flaw to have for Ani to be unable to see her privileges and be like, oh, there's like a moment where she's like, oh, I didn't even think that you're taking a bath in the cold river. Do you want my bath water? And Celia's like, you just offered me your dirty bath water.
Your tepid bath water.
Like it's I like seeing that.
Me too. Again, that's showing, not telling.
Yeah, and like sometimes you read princess stories and it's like the princess was so humble.
And she thinks about servants all the time. She wants democracy. All the time.
And so
she wants equality.
I like this doesn't have that.
Yeah.
She doesn't see it until it's, spoiler alert, ripped away from her.
Yeah, and that's where the prince and the pauper story comparison comes in.
Yeah.
And I loved that about Ani, where she is blind to her privilege. That's another part of her character that changes at the end.
Yeah.
So Shannon Hale is like paying attention to all these parts of Ani's character that will change over time.
Yep.
And it's not like at the end of the story she becomes the princess again and she says, now we'll have...
everybody gets a vote.
Yes, an equal society.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen, right? That's unrealistic.
Which is good because I hate that too.
I know. It's so hollow. But Ani does, she does show you how she rejects some of her privilege by recognizing in a social situation, oh, I'm being treated differently because of who I was born to be.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let that happen again. So Celia, spoiler alert, stabs Ani in the back, or tries to. She's used her people speaking skills to convince half of Ani's guard, maybe more, to follow Celia instead of Ani.
And Ungalad.
And Ungalad, her true love.
Yeah.
I hate Ungalad.
Creepy, greasy old man.
Yeah. And I hate Celia, too.
Yeah.
Which villains will be really fun to talk about.
Yeah.
Why this is such a good villain compared to other stories. And why is it so gosh dang hard for authors to get it right?
Yeah. Yeah, she's fantastic.
Yeah. So Ani, it's so painful.
It is.
Her guard is betrayed. She's watering Falada in the forest. And that's when Ungalad and Celia begin their uprising.
Yeah, and it's just past the halfway point of
their trick.
The trick.
Yes.
That was purposeful. Anyway.
Yeah. And Celia's plan is to take Ani's place. She's been raised as the princess and lady in waiting. She is kind of the princess in waiting.
Yeah.
She was going to kill Ani, take her place, get married in Bayern.
And no one would ever know.
No one would ever know.
Because, I mean, it's such a far trek.
Yeah.
That...
and no one had met her before.
Yeah, no one knows what she looks like.
No one from Bayern had met Celia before, so they wouldn't know who she looked like. They would only probably have descriptions of what Ani was like.
And they both are the same, blonde hair, whatever. Same. They no one would know.
And Celia's educated. She has people speaking. She'd be a great... well, she would have the skills to become a great
she, on paper, would be a better
queen.
princess.
Yeah. And there's a very painful moment when Ani realizes that she can't trust anyone anymore.
Yeah.
She has to leave Falada behind, which is so painful because it's like, okay, she had Celia, she had her father, she had Falada. And all three of those things really quickly are taken away from her. And all she wants is her family. And those were the only things that accepted her for who she was.
Yeah. It's fantastic.
Just so heartbreaking.
And she also has 3 gifts from her mother, which is her golden chalice to drink from. There's like symbolism to all these things. Her mother's ring.
Did that come from the fairy tale?
Yes.
Okay.
The mother's ring, and then her hanky with 3 drops of her mother's blood on it.
Yeah.
In the original fairy tale, I could get this a little bit blurry, but that hanky is her mother's protection, and as long as she has that protection, she will be safe, and she loses that in the river, which starts the process of her having nothing.
Yeah. I thought they would do something with that, where it's like Ani, during their trek in the woods, they're attacked by wolves, and a bird speaks to Ani and says, danger. Ani warns everyone. There's someone attacking.
That does happen.
I know.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Continue.
And Ani says that the only reason why she was able to know that was happening is because of her mother's
protection or ward or whatever.
Yeah, and then there's another time when someone tries to push her over a cliff into a waterfall by throwing a rock at her forehead or whatever.
Yeah.
And she only knew that it was going to happen because of her mother's protection. But really, it was a bird that warned her first.
Yeah.
So I thought they were doing a good job of like establishing Ani. Once again, she's like put up this defensive wall between her ability to speak to other animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
And she's placing the blame of like being able to speak to animals on her mother's handkerchief.
Yeah.
But then she loses that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have a problem with it not coming back as like she finds the handkerchief again and she realizes this wasn't the real power, is me being able to speak to animals.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I was waiting for, is the realization.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Of like, oh, I can speak to animals. That's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't really happen. Like she doesn't say that out loud.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think there's some small amounts of that in the later half when she's working with her coworkers.
Yeah. But they don't judge her for being able to speak to animals.
They're like, whoa, no
in the first
way.
place.
Tell him to go poop on Razzo.
Yeah. But they don't. No one recognizes that she has beast speaking.
Except for one person.
Who?
Conrad. And he betrays her.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
No, it's okay. It really does lead well to probably the gripe that I had with this book the most about the magic system. Yeah, we won't get into it quite yet. But Ani escapes into the woods. Mm-hmm. And she finds a family there that takes care of her. Yeah.
And she gives her her mother's ring to be like, please, this is all I can give you. I'll work for you, but this is all I have. And well, the first thing she does is pass out.
Mm-hmm.
And then she takes the woman's place. And anyway.
Yeah.
She works for them for a while.
She does.
To earn her keep, I guess.
Yes. And this family is important only because we mentioned earlier that Ani, she's blind to her privilege at first, and at the end she realizes the privilege that she has. And this family, I don't remember her name, Griselda and Finn.
Yeah, Finn,
something like that. Whatever her name is, Griselda. At the end of the story, Ani is wounded and injured, needs help, and Griselda offers to let her sleep on her own bed. And she says, no, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. So that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Is that's the family that she shows. Yes. She recognizes that she's not better than other people.
Yeah.
And she's not a princess where she's like stuck up and thinks she's better than other people. She's just blind to her privilege. Mm-hmm. Just so great.
Yes, it is.
I love that
And that makes you care about her so much more versus if someone was just turning a blind eye, turning away from the privilege or from the people who are the cost of the the people. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, the people who she should be treating as her equals.
Yeah.
So this is the bulk of the book, which is we've spent like 45 minutes just talking about the first 7 or 8 chapters.
Quarter.
I don't know. But most of the book takes place as Ani working as a servant, as a goose girl.
Yeah.
And trying to get her crown back.
Yeah. And
that's the major plot.
Yeah, she's working as the king's goose herd.
Yeah.
In an effort to try to get a conference with the king to try to be like, hey, I'm the real princess. Mm-hmm. And she does try that, and then she's like, what? How is this ever going to work? How is he ever going to believe his goat herd is...
Yes.
I mean, his goose herd is the princess. Anyway.
The gauntlet there is set up well. We don't have to get into the details.
Yeah.
But it does make sense that she can't just go up to the king and say, hey,
I'm the real princess.
I'm a princess Anadori, because she doesn't have the gift of people speaking. She's not assertive, as we've established earlier. And
she's given away her mother's crest, her mother's napkin, and her mother's thing. She has nothing to prove.
Yeah.
To prove herself.
And Celia has the power of people speaking. She would have done a really good job of convincing the king and other people that she is who she says she is. Yeah. And the only thing that Ani has that she could use to prove that she is the real princess is Falada. Mm-hmm. And this is where, spoiler alert, okay, we're going to have to get into this. This is where it really reminds me of Assassin's Apprentice.
Also, this is... You were saying how sometimes there's not enough cost to the animal speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great example of the cost for animal speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So when they get separated from the caravan and Ani has to run away and they still have Falada, Celia tries to ride Falada because it's the princess's horse, and he goes mad. He goes crazy because he doesn't have Annie, and it's implied that Ungalad has tortured him, and he goes so crazy that when they get to the castle, Celia makes a whole big thing of like, oh, my horse was attacked by a wolf and
It's
gone
lost its mind.
mad. We have to put him down. I'm so sad, my cherished horse.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I would argue this is not a cost to the animal speaking.
I think it is.
Okay,
I think
way?
not having Annie there to communicate and to explain to him what was going on helped facilitate him going mad.
Mm-hmm.
That is my opinion.
Yes. Okay, so we're thinking about two different things.
Oh, okay.
You're right, and I agree with you. Falada is eventually, spoiler alert, killed.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why is because obviously Celia has to convince people that she is who she is. They don't know where Ani is. Ani could come back at any moment.
Yeah.
And ride Falada and prove to them that she's the real crown princess.
Yeah.
So they have to drive him mad somehow. So Ungalad did something, we don't see it. It's just Celia, that's something that she says. Ungalad did to Falada to make him go insane.
Yeah.
Ani has one moment where she can try to tame him. She boldly walks into the stable master's grounds where she's not welcome. She's seen as a goose girl. Tries to speak to him, but she can't.
He's so
because he's so heartbroken and he's lost his mind. It's horrible. It's like an Old Yeller moment, but for horse girls.
Yes.
And eventually he's killed.
Yeah.
And Ani goes back to the butcher who killed him and says, "Can you give him a proper burial? Here's some gold." And he agrees, and he stuffs Falada's head and puts it on top of a gate.
Right where the animal herder people live.
Yes, which is where Ani works. So she sees, it would be
so
like,
heartbreaking.
this is like some Game of Thrones level of
messed up
debauchery, where it's like, they may as well just have cut off her father's head and put it on a spike.
Yeah, it's awful.
And this is where I say the cost for Falada dying is a part of her learning how to speak to the wind.
Yeah.
So they have two magic systems in this book, basically. Because Ani only uses two magic systems. That's what I'm trying to say. One is that she can speak to animals, and that is relatively effortless for her to obtain because she learned how to speak to birds with her aunt. And she still has to learn to speak to different birds.
And it's like
they have their own
easy
dialects.
to translate between robin to sparrow or swan to goose, you know.
But she still has to learn some specifics of new birds, which I like.
I do too.
And when she first comes to Bayern to become the Goose Girl, she can't understand the geese at all, which I liked.
Yeah. She's like, oh, swan, geese, those are similar enough. And then she tries it and she's like,
Well, not really.
This is going to be a lot harder than I thought it would.
Yes. The other cost to using animal speaking is the societal cost. Yeah. Right? Other people see her speaking to animals and it's taboo and they will do something to her. We don't really know what that is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of implied that the people of Bayern are more accepting of magic than Kildenry.
Or at least the poor people who are working in the animal areas are.
Or they just don't see it. Like there are magicians in the street at market day. And they're like, yeah, you can do magic. Yeah. That's not weird. So that societal cost kind of goes away when she enters Bayern. The reason why the animal speaking is so important to Ani and why I think it's more powerful for her and an emotional level is because it's connected to her internal conflict. Yeah. Which is her aunt spoke to animals. And as soon as her aunt left, her mother said, don't tell anybody that you can speak to other animals. Yeah. They take away her puppy. She can't be around birds. She can't go back to Swan Lake.
Yep, she's not allowed.
Yeah, and she's blocked off being able to do that in her own mind. Yeah. So I felt like it would have been a more satisfying arc if it was more about her accepting who she is by saying that she can speak to animals at the end of the story, you know?
Yeah.
It's just a teeny tiny gripe.
I can see that.
It's kind of similar to, if you've watched My Hero Academia, Todoroki, where it's like, I never use my left side, my father's power, because he abused me.
Yeah.
So it's not that he's not incapable of using his fire powers, because he's really good.
Yeah.
He's choosing not to. So the hurdle for him to overcome that cost is emotional.
Yeah.
So it's similar with Ani.
Yeah.
But as soon as she gets to Bayern, she speaks to geese and other animals in front of other people, and it's kind of like no big deal.
Yeah.
And then the magic system that becomes more interesting to learn about is her being able to speak to the wind.
Yes.
But it lacks that internal conflict. You see what I'm saying?
I see
Because her
what
mother
you're
didn't.
saying.
Because her aunt didn't teach her how to speak to the wind.
Oh, okay, yeah,
And her mother didn't say, never speak to the wind.
Yes.
She said, don't speak to animals.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, that does make sense. It kind of loses the emotional drive.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Other things attached to her learning the wind magic system,
Yeah.
which makes it satisfying. So I'm kind of torn, where it's like, how do you resolve this story where it's like, at the end of the story, she says, I'm the Goose Girl. I can speak to animals, damn it, and I'm not ashamed.
Yeah.
And I don't care if my mother doesn't love me. This is who I am. Garrick, he loves me for being able to speak to geese.
Yes.
We sleep with 3 geese in our bed every night.
Oh my gosh.
You know, something like that. Maybe it would have been more potent emotionally.
Yeah.
Because it would have resolved that emotional arc, right?
Yeah. You're correct.
Yes.
I agree.
I'm right again.
I agree, but
Thank you.
I don't care.
No.
And I love it.
It's a personal opinion thing.
No, yeah.
Because-
but it's a good point.
Yeah. Her speaking to the wind is interesting in its own way.
Yeah. I do like how when she does speak to the wind, that one is seen as more taboo in her Bayern arc. Like Conrad, so there's a female goat herd and a male goat herd. Why do I keep saying goat herd? Geese herder. And Conrad doesn't like Ani because she's really good at talking to the geese magically. And he's jealous of that, and she gets a lot of recognition, and that's something that he craves personally. And one day...
Which is great.
Yeah, and one day he sees her speaking to the wind later on in the book. Like, she's drying out her blonde hair, which proves that she's not from Bayern. This is a big thing that we haven't mentioned. People from Kildenry usually are fair-skinned, fair-haired, blonde-haired. And people from Bayern usually have brown hair. And so when she gets there, she stains and dyes her hair and her eyebrows with roots and hair dye. And so she always wears a hair wrap to disguise her golden hair that proves her heritage.
Hair.
And Conrad sees this and is like, oh, that's the missing lady in waiting that went missing and went crazy. Because Celia was like, we need to find Ani. Let's say that my lady in waiting tried to ambush us, and now we're looking for her.
Yeah.
So Conrad turns her in because he sees her using goose speak and wind speak, and I really enjoyed that consequence coming from someone who was also complex.
Yes. And
he regrets it at the end. There's a very sweet moment where
he has
he's
a good
like,
character
I'm
arc.
sorry.
Yeah. Her secondary characters are super simple, but they have motivations that make sense, and they have nice little arcs.
Yeah.
I would say that Conrad turns her in mostly because he sees that she has gold hair.
I appreciate that that's what you thought. That is not what I thought.
Because Celia doesn't say, my lady in waiting can speak to animals, it can speak to the wind.
No, but I think he's like, what is up with this crazy outsider who's a witch?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. I can see both ways.
This is such a tiny gripe.
Yes.
It literally doesn't matter. The point is she's turned in.
Yes.
Connor betrays her, and then Celia has Ani in her clutches. Basically.
Yeah.
We won't get into it. It doesn't matter.
It's kind of complex at the end.
Yes.
But anyway.
Just on a quick note on villains, because we mentioned this, because I do have one last thing to say about the wind magic system, is villains are apparently difficult to write because I've read so many books this year where it's like, your villains suck, Suzanne Collins.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but President Snow isn't very interesting.
It's true.
And Coin is just a nothing of a character.
Yeah.
And has such a massive role to play in the last 20 pages of that book that it's really unsatisfying.
Yeah.
Villains need to be written the same way that protagonists are. Their motivations are just anti or against the protagonist.
Yeah.
And Celia is so great because she's exactly the opposite of Ani.
She's a foil.
Yeah, she is. She has her realistic motivations, and she takes away things that matter to Ani.
Yeah.
And it makes you hate her.
Yes.
She takes away Falada. She kills Falada.
Yeah. And I also enjoy...
She's such a spoiled... Ooh, bad words.
Yes. I also enjoy...
She's not spoiled,
when villains are more realistic like that.
Of course.
Versus her, like, if she was like, oh, I have magic firepower and I'm gonna burn everybody!
Mm-hmm.
Versus she's like, oh, I'm just a master manipulator and can make anybody believe anything I say.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, oh, that's terrifying.
Yeah, she
That's
feels
terrifying.
really powerful. For most of the book, you feel like Celia has all the cards in the deck.
Yes.
Is that the saying?
I don't know, but yes.
She feels very powerful.
Uh-huh.
Which is great. That's really engaging as a reader. It's that Ani feels like an underdog, and she has all these obstacles to overcome. Like, how is she going to convince the king that she's the true princess? And watching her figure that problem out is satisfying, and it happens at a slow pace.
Yes.
That's all I want to say about villains and Celia, is that she's really well written.
Well, plus, and you hate Ungalad, too.
You do.
You really hate him.
Yeah, I hate Celia more.
He's a great sleazebag, too. Yeah, I do, too. There's no contest.
It's more personal.
But it's
yeah. Ungalad's a dumb brute.
And there's so many great small moments in this that really embrace the found family and she finds her family among the other animal workers. Yeah. And there's several times when Ani's in trouble or someone else is in trouble, and they all immediately stand arms together to protect each other. And it's just, that's what she's looking for the whole time, you know? And it feels so great. Too. Yeah, exactly.
Garrick even sees her as a servant, and he falls in love with her as a servant and not as a princess. Yeah. Where it's like, oh, that's right. They really do love each other for who they are, not for their title. Yeah. Or like, oh, we were a set-up marriage. Yeah. So we're supposed to be in love. Now, Ani really knows Garrick loves me for who I am. That stuff's great. Yeah. Anna is also a great friend that she trusts right away.
I love Anna!
This is the Ugly Duckling story, right? Yeah. Where it's like she's resolving that arc, where she finds her family where she belongs. What I wanted was tie that in with the magic system where she can speak with animals just a little bit stronger, but that's my only complaint. To get back to the wind magic system. Usually, and I think, here's where my Brandon Sanderson acolyte comes into play. He said that in his Mistborn book, he introduced a magic system at the last second because he and his editor felt like it needed more of a punch. And so after he finished the book, he said, okay, I'm going to give her a new magic system. I'll explain it in the second book, but it comes out of nowhere. So he said, that's a mistake with Mistborn. So that could have happened in this book, which I was worried about. Yeah. Where it's like all of a sudden she's captured by Celia and her guards, and she uses her wind powers. They come out of nowhere. She's so desperate, but she pushes everyone away from her. Yeah. It's a very painful cost for her having to learn that magic system. Yeah. And she only learns how to speak to the wind because Falada's dead. Yeah. So she returns to Falada's post. That's such an indelicate way to say it.
I don't know what you would say.
Let's call it a post.
Grave site.
Graveyard, yeah. And tries to speak to him again and again. She's so desperate to speak to her only remaining friend in the world, her closest companion.
She's listening so hard and so intently.
That she can hear his voice, respond to her and say, "Princess." What a great way to teach your character a new magic skill. Right? Like you said, either you could have a resource-based magic system where it's like, I have mana in my pockets, boom, 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 and once I'm out, and I have to get more mana. Yeah. Here, the cost is also emotional. Yeah. Like, wow, you have to lose someone that you love.
Listening about it.
I know. Well, I'm just such an incredible storyteller that I'm making you emotional.
It's just so impactful, and to be able to see her go, she's at her lowest, she's like, that was my only chance and my best friend in the entire world. Okay, what am I gonna do? You know.
And so then, when she learns how to use her magic at the end, it makes it all that more satisfying.
And I think part of what helps it be satisfying is that you also get that from the beginning. Her aunt is like, there is element speaking, but I've never been able to hear that. Yes, she sets it up at the beginning. You're right. You know, and she is like, you had something on the tip of your tongue from the day you were born that I don't know if you found yet. Yeah. Like, there's a great setup there that is paid off.
Yeah, so all that stuff, like I said, I'm torn
Yeah.
I wish there was a bit more with the animal speaking thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I don't care if my mother doesn't accept me for who I am, being able to speak to animals, but that's who I am.
Yeah.
And these people are my family.
Yeah.
I think it happens implicitly.
Yeah.
Where like the people, if she told Garrick or her friends like Enna and the other servants that she could speak to animals, they'd be like, that's cool.
Yeah, they would be.
You know?
I think Enna is even like, oh, you want to teach me how? That's cool.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know.
And I think maybe it's the societal cost is kind of missing.
Yeah.
Maybe there could have been a bit more of an arc there.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like she's speaking to this geese and the other people are like, girl, stop doing that.
Yeah.
And then there's some kind of a setback in her quest to get back her
maybe
throne,
she's like
thrown into prison.
She's not allowed to tend to the geese anymore because she's talking to them.
Something like that.
Yeah. That would be interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my one teeny tiny complaint.
I mean, if you just have one.
I know.
That's
it's a great book. I really did love it. And it was almost a perfect script. But like I said, the scope was exactly right.
Yeah.
She didn't stretch herself too thin. It wasn't a big epic story. She didn't worry about having a lot of like POV chapters in.
Yes.
With multiple characters. Yeah. It's just Ani's journey, really, of finding her family.
And you still get fantastic insights to the characters around her. Like, it proves that you don't have to do a multiple POV to get a clear view of how Finn feels about Enna and how Razzo is himself completely, or, you know what I mean?
Even the Squire Tanjiro.
Oh, yes.
Teo.
The little guy.
Teo, right?
I think so.
Something like that.
Anyway.
He's cute.
Yeah.
Like, the secondary characters are cute and distinct. But she doesn't try to make them as interesting as Ani.
Yeah.
Selly is probably the most important character next to Ani, because that's where most of the conflict is.
Yeah.
And even then, we don't get very much information on her or what she's doing. Just little things that change the plot.
Yep.
Plot's pretty simple, but it's satisfying.
It's good. It's great.
Even the way that she uses her magic at the very end of the story, her wind magic, I felt was interesting.
I do too. I loved that moment.
I thought she was going to, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert, I thought she was going to suck all the air out of Grindelwald.
I thought she was going to do that too. I was kind of like, come on, do
Kill
it.
him.
Do it.
And I wonder if
he deserves it.
Maybe a more experienced wind speaker could do that. It's like, that's a pretty powerful ability.
Yep.
And if they were in a room full of people, could they just go like, and suck them all up?
Yep.
I don't know.
We should keep reading the series.
Yeah. But she writes her magic systems well, where you can speculate on those things too.
Yeah.
It's like, how much more could she do?
Yes.
What are the costs and limits of this thing?
Yes. I'm so glad you loved it.
Yeah, I did.
Is this one of your favorite books?
Wait.
You still have one more thing. I
have one last thing.
Go for it.
But that is a good question. Celia, when Ani and Celia are confronting the king at the very end of the book, and Ani says, I'm the real princess, and then Celia says, nope, this is my whatever. The king says, I'm not dealing with this. Celia, you're the real princess. How do people in Gildenry punish people like Ani?
Oh my
She says, they strip them down, put them in a barrel full of nails, and roll them down the hill. But I don't know, it's just a suggestion.
Yep, which is crazy.
Yeah. And then at the end of the story, they say, Ani, what's going to happen with Celia? She's like, I don't know. They may punish her the same way they were going to punish me. And then she lived happily ever after. So she kind of left that to your imagination.
Yes.
Where it's like, what I thought Ani would be like, no, be merciful.
Nope. She's like, you killed my horse.
You're dead.
That's it.
Like in the most horrible way possible.
It. Well, I think I loved that because it's like the passive person who's always like, okay, fine, whatever. And Celia's like, okay, you'll have the worst punishment ever because you're evil. And she's like, okay. And then it flips on the opposite side. And they're like, what do we do with Celia? And Ani's like, I have an idea. The same thing that you said would happen to me.
Oh, that's horrible. I don't know if I like that.
Interesting.
To me, it's kind of like Katniss at the end of Mockingjay.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair.
Where it's like, she didn't really learn her lesson.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a small thing. It doesn't make me like Anya all that much. Also, Ani didn't say like, I know how to punish Celia. Let's do this to her. So she doesn't feel
still
evil.
Passive.
Still passive.
Yeah.
She's like, maybe she's like trying to keep that core part of her character where it's like, she's more assertive, but she hasn't completely changed.
She's not evil.
So she's like, it's not up to me. I don't know. The king's going to do what he wants to Celia.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the only other flaw
I
that I had
totally
with the
can
story.
see that. I can totally see
I
that.
had another thing to say.
Go for it.
Things are cropping up to my mind.
Okay.
At the end of the story, Garrick gets into a sword fight with Ungalad. He gets stabbed in the side. Garrick and Ani are in love.
Mm-hmm.
And Ani, she's like hanging out with Enna. She says, "Where's the prince? Your prince that you love?" "I don't know. He's been in the hospital, but they say I can't see him." I'm like, "Go to him, Ani."
Yeah. Well, she doesn't know. Oh, wait. Yes, she does know it's him.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, sorry.
She
Yeah,
knows
that's a
that
good
Garrick
point.
is the prince.
You're like, come on, girl.
That
girl
would have been a
boss.
great way to show some
Girl
more
boss.
growth too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like she waits the
she
6
knows what
month
she wants.
warning period.
Go do it.
Yeah.
Instead of, yeah.
Like with her mother. At the beginning of the book, she waits 6 months before confronting her mother.
Yeah.
Like, go
That's a
see
good
your one
point.
true love.
Yes.
Come on. Like I said, only a few small things where I'm like, I would have liked it a little bit better if you had done this instead.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could incorporate the animal speaking magic system in a more satisfying manner.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it is a stepping stone to get to the big magic, but it's still important, and you set it up as such an important thing to her and her own personal backstory that you can't just leave it behind as just a stepping stone.
Yeah, I felt like it was important enough that it does need some kind of resolution.
Yeah.
But everything else about it was so good.
Good. I'm so glad.
It kind of overshadowed those things. Yeah, so do you have a question for me?
Is this one of your
Oh, wait, no, I'm just kidding.
I thought you were being for real. That was funny.
Mm-hmm.
Is this one of your favorite books?
No, but I would recommend it wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I really did love this book.
Good.
I can't consider it among my favorites, though.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Is it one of your favorites?
Yes, easily. And yes, I would and do recommend it frequently to people.
Good. It is a worthy book.
It's great.
Shannon Hale is deserving of her accolades, I believe, as an excellent author and storyteller.
Yeah.
Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe. We do a video every week.
Yes,
or we try to.
Please do.
Leave a comment if you like this book.
Yeah, if you have any other retellings, let us know what retellings you've read.
Do you like any other Shannon Hale books?
Mm-hmm.
Which ones are your favorite? That's everything. Goodbye.
Bye.